Abby Sharp is so frustrating. Oh my God. Hi, I'm Jasmine, the sequel, and I am not relatable. So, we're back again for another Abby Sharp related video. I actually want to talk about Abby Sharp's video that she did responding to a video that Dr. Mike did, responding to a video about how apparently he was fatphobic based on, I think it was Reddit. I know it's gotten a little ridiculous at this point. The reason I want to talk about this is, first off, to be completely honest with you, I've said before, I actually rather dislike Abby. Not so much for what she offers professionally. I think she's a very competent dietitian. I appreciate her What I Eat in a Day review series. It obviously inspired my What I Eat in a Day review series. And I care about the fact that she's bringing quality nutritional information to the people who might not be able to access the kind of services she provides. That said, Abby has a really bad habit of hyper-focusing on basically individuals on the internet who are thin or they're skinny. I have very infrequently seen her review people who are, they fall into like the fat or the obese category. I think the one that comes to mind, two actually come to mind, Sierra Schultze, and I saw that she did one on Nikocado. Nikocado is a very, very special case, and he is a disaster of a human person. And also, he doesn't really do what I eat in a day. Like, he doesn't talk about what he eats in a day regularly. So the only person whose What I Eat in a Day videos that she's actually reviewed who happens to be an obese, overweight individual is Sierra Schultze. I cannot talk. Is Sierra Schultze. And that was after she'd seen a dietitian. I've mentioned all of this before in my other Abby Sharp video, which I will put in the cards above if you guys want to check that out. But the reason why this video rubs me the wrong way is because she's taking aim at another healthcare professional. And I've watched Dr. Mike's video. I've watched actually a lot of his videos. And for the most part, I think he's a very approachable, very entertaining version of a healthcare professional. And I appreciate what he brings to the internet. I appreciate what he says and what messages he's trying to convey. So the fact that she's taking aim at him initially just sort of strikes me the wrong way. That being said, no one is above criticism, right? So I went into Abby's video with an open mind to see if she has issues with him, what those issues are based on. And I came away with the same disappointed feeling that I have after watching her do another thin person's What I Eat in a Day review. The one that just recently came out that I have not seen yet is Ian Somerhalder. He's the Vampire Diaries guy. I don't know how to say his last name. I've never seen Vampire Diaries. I just know him from Lost. He was cute in Lost. Anyway, I don't know why she does what she does. I don't know why she hyper focuses on certain segments of the population while aiming her message at everybody on the internet and in the world at large, right? If you're claiming that you are essentially giving the information and presenting the information for anyone to enjoy, but you're only really concerned about the segment of the population who has eating disorders, then all the information you're saying comes out a little bit disingenuous. And that's my basic issue with her. That's the biggest issue I have with her, is that she talks a lot about eating disorders. She talks a lot about health at every size and intuitive eating, which I have so many problems with, and there's a video coming later down the line on that. But she talks a lot about those principles, and she talks about how they apply to people with eating disorders without ever actually saying that this is only for people who already have a troubled history with food and not for the general population, and that it is only X percentage of the population who actually has this problem, right? Because without saying that, what ends up happening is that any person watching her video might think, oh, well, perhaps I shouldn't try to lose weight on my own at all. Perhaps I shouldn't try and live a healthier lifestyle because it's doomed to fail from the start. And Abby said this, and she's obviously a dietitian, so she mustn't be wrong. She is wrong. The evidence for suggesting that yo-yo dieting is bad for you is very, very lacking. I'm going to link a couple of studies, one of which is obviously a rat study. So, put into it not as much stock as I would. But considering how bad obesity is in her own words, I would think that people should at least make an attempt to live a happier, healthier lifestyle. Anyway, with that said, let's get into her actual video. I'm gonna go through, pick out some of the points that she makes, and I'm gonna talk about them. Her video overall is pretty large, and I don't have a lot to say on most of it. She agrees with Dr. Mike on a lot of it. Dr. Mike is also, he's not perfect, so he does talk a little bit about, intermittent fasting and also keto as a diet and veganism as a diet, which veganism is not a diet, it's a lifestyle. Either way, she talks about all of those things. And for the most part, I agree with both him and her. So I'll leave all that out.
For the average healthy person, going on a short course of keto will help them lose some weight, and it probably won't be detrimental to their health.
Okay, so Dr. Mike's experience is not uncommon. While we know that the keto diet can result in short-term weight loss and increased feelings of fullness, it can also be inconvenient and unsustainable over time, lead to decreased exercise performance, at least in the early days, and increased constipation due to the lack of fiber-rich carbs. However, Dr. Mike also mentions that someone can go on the keto diet for short-term weight loss, and it probably won't be detrimental to their health. I don't necessarily disagree, even though this does not consider the potential emotional toll of dieting on some individuals.
All right, so this is what I mean, right? She's giving this advice basically on the premise that everybody who's watching this could potentially have an eating disorder. And I understand what she's saying, but at the end of the day, unfortunately, this is a numbers game, right? 9% of the population in the United States actually has an eating disorder, and that includes all ends of the spectrum, right? So you're talking people who have anorexia and bulimia, and then you're also talking like people who have binge eating disorder and are morbidly obese. So everybody falls within that category. And about 10,200 people die each year because of eating disorders. Those are undeniable facts, and it's extremely sad. I will never sit here and tell you that diet culture is not a real thing. I will never sit here and tell you that fat phobia is not a real thing. Fat people are discriminated against. Fat phobia and diet culture are harmful. They exist. They're just not as prevalent as people make them out to be. They're just not as pervasive and as deep-seated as people make them out to be. And they're not the root of every single problem, right? Because 42.4% of the population suffers from morbid obesity. So if only 9% of the population has an eating disorder, but 42.4% of the population is suffering from morbid obesity, sorry, I should rephrase that, from obesity, then obviously, you're not every single one of those people can have an eating disorder. And I understand some percentage of those are going to be people who haven't been diagnosed with it, who can't afford to see a doctor. But even if we're saying half, even if half of everybody who is overeating and who is obese and overweight, even half of those, that would still be far greater than the 9% of people who have all types of eating disorders, not just people who have eating disorders that swing more towards the overweight and obese category, right? And furthermore, 300,000 people die every single year from direct obesity-related causes. That's not talking about things that obesity has made worse. So we're not talking about people who died from an inoperable cancer because their morbid obesity made them ineligible for surgery. We're talking about people who directly have died from comorbidities associated with being morbidly obese and being obese and overweight. Overweight, not so much, but definitely obese. So you're talking about 10,200 deaths, which very sad. Do not get me wrong. I sympathize for every single one of those people and every single one of their families. But when you're comparing that with the 300,000 people whose deaths you're just dismissing out of hand because they don't fall within the intuitive eating, haze, health at every size, fat acceptance, body positivity movement that you seem to align yourself so closely with, that is disingenuous and it's gross. And as a dietitian, I would really have hoped that she, of all people, would know better. And once more, I don't care if she wants to talk about that 9%. I think somebody should talk about that 9%. I think somebody should be advocating out there for the Chantels and Amber Lyns and the Eugenia Coonies of the world, right? You want people out here giving correct medical advice so they don't progress to that level of just body dissatisfaction and disordered eating. I empathize with her. I care about her cause. I honest to goodness do, because I've seen it impacting people in my own life, right? I have an uncle. He is not my genetic uncle, but he's as close to a brother as, he could be to my mom. And his wife suffers from basically anorexia. And it's a difficult disorder to deal with. It is awful. It's an awful, awful thing. And I've seen what it's done to this amazing woman. So I don't disagree with her. But when you come onto a platform like YouTube, when you come onto a platform, any platform really, like Instagram, like Twitter, and you give your opinion as an opinion for the general population without the disclaimer, which she herself has said in other videos that disclaimers are very, very important, without the disclaimer of I am only talking about people who have a disordered eating past, what it seems like is that you're giving this advice to the general population, and the general population is obese and they need to lose weight. I need to lose weight. You coming onto this platform and saying, you're fine, you're perfect the way you are, look for other non-weight loss solutions, is not helpful. It's harmful. You're actively harming people. You're actively pushing a message that's going to keep those 300,000 people on the exact same path. This is a trolley problem, and I understand. I am not a philosopher. I am not, I've never read anything by Kant, as it were. But this seems like a no-brainer to me. I think that if you want to focus on the 9% of the population that has an eating disorder, then you need to make that extremely clear. Otherwise, if you're going to come on a platform talking about healthy eating and how you can eat better and how you can do better without ever mentioning the fact that that's who you're tailoring your opinion towards, that's who you're catering to, everything you say comes across as too extreme. Because for an average person who's not suffering from anything, you've put the thought into their head that I should never do anything about my weight, because what if I become anorexic? What if I become bulimic? What if I develop binge eating disorder? When for the vast, vast majority of people, that will never, ever happen. And I think that messaging, the way that she speaks to people and the group that she speaks to is really the big difference between her and Dr. Mike, right? She talks to the health at every size, fat activism, and intuitive eating communities and people who come from a disordered eating background. Whereas Dr. Mike is giving information to the public at large, to anyone who wants to watch and listen to him. So of course he's not going to be tailoring his advice to just those folks.
But I also don't think that we should be talking about short-term weight loss, period, when we know that statistically, most people who lose weight in the short run stop the diet and then gain it right back. We also know that this weight cycling can put someone at risk for detrimental health effects, such as an increased risk of insulin resistance, heart disease, blood pressure, inflammation, and an increased risk of mortality overall.
When you're talking about this, I really need you to give me numbers and stats. And there are numbers and stats available, right? I checked some of them myself. This information is out there. Might be a little old, but it'll give you at least an approximate of where those numbers are now. So I need you to give me numbers and stats, because if you don't do that and you just give this advice to the population at large, you just put this information out there, people are going to assume that it applies to everybody. They're going to inflate the numbers in their head, because if they trust you, they're trusting your word for what you're saying, and they're taking your credibility as a check. They might not go and Google anything themselves. They might not cross-reference the CDC, the FDA, the whatevers. So you need to provide numbers and statistics. You need to provide numbers and statistics to back up what you're saying, or at least link those resources down below. All right, so I touched on this briefly in the beginning, but I'll talk about it here again. She talks a lot about how yo-yo dieting is terrible for you. The evidence the evidence to suggest that yo-yo dieting is bad for you is actually really weak. And from everything that I've been able to find, for the most part, yo-yo dieting is fine. I'm going to throw up a few of those articles on the screen. I'm not going to read through them for you, but I'm going to put them on screen. I'm also going to link them down below so you understand what I'm talking about. Yo-yo dieting, if it's done from a very orthorexic sort of point of view, can be bad for you. Absolutely. But that's more a reflection on your mental health, right? There's very little evidence suggesting that chronic yo-yo dieting will ruin your metabolism or whatever it is that supposedly yo-yo dieting is going to be doing. All of the evidence that she's giving here is like very, very weak evidence. In any other circumstance, I don't think Abbey Sharp would be saying with so much confidence that this is a thing that is good for you or bad for you. But for some reason, when it comes to intuitive eating and the principles of intuitive eating, it's almost like she has blinders on to all of the evidence that contradicts this.
In the United States, obesity has become an epidemic. So I understand why most people want to lose weight. It's actually been proven in the best quality studies. Keeping your weight healthy is one of the most important things you can do to maintain your health, to live a long life. So if you're trying to lose weight,
here's my 2 cents just from what I've seen from Dr. Mike. While I do think that his nutrition recommendations are always pretty evidence-based and unbiased in terms of what's good or bad, much of his discussion around nutrition does tend to revolve around losing weight and calories. And I get why. I mean, as a doctor, he knows that people are mainly motivated to change their diet so that they can change their pant size.
I want you guys to replay what Dr. Mike just said and what Abbey Sharp responded with. When did Dr. Mike talk a lot, like at all, about aesthetics? She's the one who's making this about looks. She's the one who's making it about pant size. The majority of times when doctors recommend that people lose weight, they're doing it from a place of, hey, this is bad for your health. I'm sure that there are doctors out there who will also recommend it because they are fatphobic and they want people just to look aesthetically prettier, right? Like I said, fat phobia is a real thing that really happens. Fat discrimination is a real thing that really happens. But 100%, every time I have personally spoken to a doctor and they've told me maybe you should try weight loss, it's always been from a place of you have got these symptoms, rather than giving you medication that might affect those things and might make you feel better but will also have side effects of its own. Why don't you try losing weight so you can address those things on your own without needing any of that? And if it doesn't work, then I will come back and we'll run a bunch more tests and see what we can do to alleviate the problems medically from like a medicinal or a therapeutic point of view, right? That's my experience. Now, of course, I am not everybody, and I'm sure there's people out there who've had real assholes for doctors, but I am almost certain that the majority of people who've been told, why don't you try weight loss, aren't being told try weight loss in a vacuum. They didn't just walk into a doctor's office, the doctor saw them for like 3 seconds and went, well, I know that you have a broken foot, but have you tried weight loss as a solution? I'm pretty sure that when patients come to a doctor and they say, hey, I'm suffering from back pain. Hey, I'm suffering from foot pain. Hey, what do I do about this cancer that I have growing inside of me? And the doctor says, you need to lose weight for those problems. They're not being fatphobic. You lose the weight, your feet will feel better. You lose the weight, your back will feel better. You lose the weight, we might be able to operate and remove the cancer. I sometimes feel like I'm screaming into the void when it comes with her. And that's the real tragedy of the situation. I want to like her so bad.
But it's also important to note that focusing on things that we can control, like behaviors, rather than things that we can't necessarily, like weight, may help people maintain those lifestyle changes even if the scale doesn't budge. And this is important because we know that health is not exclusively measured by someone's weight. In fact, there is ample research to suggest that we can be overweight or even obese and still be considered metabolically healthy. But I would just adjust Dr. Mike's statement that keeping a healthy weight is one of the most important things that you can do to maintain your health. And instead, I would shift the focus by saying eating a balanced diet, moving your body, getting adequate sleep, and managing your stress levels are some of the most important things that you can do to maintain your health and live a long life. See what it did there? Something that you can't control versus behaviors that are within reach.
I don't agree with you. Just saying that focusing on behaviors is not actually correct. Because if a doctor says, please lose weight, right, and he tells you that you should do these things to lose weight, then those are the things that he's saying. By only focusing on the actions, you're actually completely disregarding the law of thermodynamics and saying that the weight loss will happen on its own. No, I've said this before, but you can totally binge on healthy foods. You can totally binge on like just eating like large amounts of like cheese and salad and nuts, right? Nuts are good for you, right? Like a handful, an ounce or two of like almonds, peanuts, whatever are good for you. But if you eat like half a giant container of peanuts, yeah, you're gonna gain weight even if they're healthy. It doesn't matter, right? It doesn't matter that you've replaced your chips, your potato chips with pretzel thins. You're still gonna gain weight if you're eating a crap ton of pretzel chips. So I disagree with you. People need to know that they have to keep a net negative to lose weight. By not explicitly focusing on that, you're doing them a disservice. And you're putting them through all the whole rigmarole of eating healthy for no reason if they didn't even know that they had to focus on this one thing. Look, doing a diet is hard, okay? As a girl who has dieted and tried to lose weight and failed and tried to lose weight again, and I'm sure I'm gonna have backslides on my journey. Everybody does, and I don't know if I'll ever get to my like perfect ideal weight, right? I would hope that I can, but that's not a guarantee I can make because I am not a fortune teller. I don't know what's gonna happen in the future. Maybe something happens that sends me into a spiral and I don't know how to handle it. I don't know. I hope I do. I'm going to keep working at it. Even if I don't get to that healthy point, I still want to be healthier than I am now. Just, we need to destigmatize people not being able to follow through a diet, right? We need to destigmatize people trying and failing and trying again, right? This yo-yo dieting concept. We need to destigmatize that. The way that Abbey talks about it actually does, I think, more harm than good. Because if you don't talk about how difficult it is to actually stay on a diet, how difficult it is for you to accomplish that as a whole, people get this weird idea in their head that this is supposed to be easy, and then when they don't get it in like the first couple of days, they just stop, right? You want them to know, you want them to have a realistic expectation. This will be hard. This will suck. It will suck for the first 4 days and it'll suck for the 4 after that one. And it's gonna keep sucking for a while. But you know, it happens and everyone goes through it. And I think that understanding, that sense of community, that everyone who's trying to lose weight is kind of doing it together, that we're all living through this thing together. Every person who's trying to lose weight, give or take, is gonna struggle. I think that's what we should be telling people so that they don't feel like they fail and they don't just say fuck it and go back to eating whatever garbage they want. I would have thought that would be the goal of somebody who's trying to promote body positivity. Telling people the truth about how their body functions is important. I think early education for children is important. I think providing them with healthier options is important. I think reducing the amount of fast food available is important. I think that having better systems in place for assisting people who are in a lower socioeconomic status is extremely important if we want to talk about the health of a nation moving forward. But by never wanting to talk about actual weight loss and just promoting healthy behaviors and hoping that the weight loss will happen is infantilizing everybody. People are not stupid. You want to tell them the truth. You want to tell them, give them all of the information. And you want to explain to them what is hard, what is easy, what you can and cannot do. Teach them moderation. And then let them try. You are taking away that option from people and you're coddling them. And you're doing so much harm, and I don't understand how you don't see that.
but I take his health and nutrition videos with a grain of salt. Don't forget that much of the research within medicine comes from a fatphobic stance, so I feel it can be difficult for medical professionals to move away from that. I don't understand what fatphobic, how it's being used in this healthiest version of themselves. Being overweight is not just a problem for heart attack, stroke risk, it's a problem for your entire health. Cancer risk, sleep, happiness, everything suffers when disease goes up.
Here's the thing. I'm not sure I agree with the blanket statement that being overweight is a problem for your entire health. It absolutely can be, or it can impact elements of health like increasing the risk of high blood pressure, high blood sugars, joint pain, infertility, heart disease, cancer risk, sleep and liver diseases, sleep disorders, etc. But one's weight doesn't automatically dictate their health status. In fact, studies have found that 1/3 to 3/4 of people who are classified as obese are actually metabolically healthy. To drive this point home even further, a 2016 study found that unfit, skinny people were twice as likely to get diabetes as fit, fat people.
I want everybody in the fat acceptance community to stop repeating this ridiculous phrase about being metabolically healthy. Metabolic health means absolutely nothing, especially because we know the science has shown us that just because you're metabolically healthy in your 20s and your 30s doesn't mean you're going to be that way in your 50s and your 60s. So there's that. Secondarily, metabolic health actually only applies to a very small subset of actual health, right? For example, if you've got an obesity-related cancer, that is still being metabolically healthy because your metabolism, your metabolic system is not impacted. But you can still have cancer and it can still be because of your obesity, right? You can have really shot out knees. You can need knee replacements at like 40 years of age, and that will still not be considered that you're metabolically unhealthy, right? Even though it's the weight that put all that pressure on your knees and they messed it up and now you need knee replacements early on in life. So metabolic health it's a ridiculous standard for anybody to have. You have health as an entire person, right? Just like I've said a bajillion times already, we are not brains riding around in a meat suit. We are not like a person who only has metabolic health and then everything else is like kind of secondary. There is like health, and metabolic health is like a small subsect of it. So to be healthy, you also need to be metabolically healthy, but you can be metabolically healthy without being actually healthy, right? They're not one and the same. They're not the same thing. Then I figured that a person who is a registered RD would have already known that. I cannot believe I had to explain that to you, ma'am.
So like I always say, being overweight is one potential risk factor, not a death sentence by any means. The reason why this misconception is important to dismantle is that exclusively focusing on weight as the primary indicator of health can often lead to inadequate access to quality healthcare and misguided health recommendations. Now, I'm absolutely not implying that Dr. Mike or that all doctors and health professionals discriminate based on weight. Based on my own experience, that is absolutely untrue. However, we do have research to suggest that weight discrimination and anti-fat bias is highly prevalent in healthcare settings. One review of the literature found that healthcare professionals' negative perceptions of larger body folks can lead to misdiagnosis and missed diagnoses, which in turn negatively impacts outcomes. The research also found that fat patients who experience or anticipate experiencing weight bias from medical professionals often seek medical care less often, and when they do, are less likely to comply with their doctor's suggestions. We also have research to suggest that doctors will often have shorter appointments and visits with fat patients and show less emotional rapport, and that these can put individuals at risk for diabetes, heart disease, discrimination, eating disorders, sedentariness, and even early death. That is a really big problem.
This is another thing that she talks about that deeply disturbs me about why she chooses to focus on this issue in this manner. She talks a lot about how doctors will recommend weight loss as a cure for everything, and she said this in her other video as well, where she talked about not being body positive enough, where doctors don't want to give the advice that they would give to a thinner individual, and not want to give the same treatments that they would to a fat person as they would to a thinner individual. Here's the problem with the way that you're phrasing it. A lot of times when somebody comes in, when they're extremely overweight, it's actually difficult for a doctor to diagnose what is wrong with them. Not exactly the same, but I'll give you an example. When I was at my heaviest, it was hard for me to get a massage that was effective. And it wasn't because people weren't trying. It wasn't because the services that I was receiving were bad, or that people were mean, or that they were fatphobic. It was as simple as the fact that I had a lot of fat around my joints, and when they wanted to get to a pressure point, it was hard for them to do so, to push through my fat and get to my pressure points. It made it difficult for them to provide me the service that I was there for. And that's the case with doctors sometimes. It's hard for them to provide you the service that you came there for when you are very, very overweight or obese, right? It's very hard for them to look at you and say, hey, this is what's wrong. Like, if I come in and I say I have shortness of breath to a doctor right now, the doctor is going to say, okay, she's obviously overweight, but that's the only complicating factor there. Other than that, I don't really have any other host of respiratory related illness. I don't have asthma. I don't have anything else. They're gonna check out my lungs. They're gonna give me some tests, and they're gonna go, okay, we'll try this, right? Someone comes in who is 400 pounds and says, I have shortness of breath. They've got a lot of mass sitting on their chest that can make it difficult for them to breathe. Should a doctor ignore that? That seems irresponsible. And what if that there is something wrong with them that can be fixed easily with weight loss, right? Say that somebody has sleep apnea, for example. Should a doctor give them medication and a CPAP machine, but never advise them to try and lose weight so that they don't have to do those things anymore? Is that fatphobic? I would argue not. They are giving you the easiest, fastest solution. And I understand that weight loss in and of itself isn't easy, but it is by far the least expensive of the options. It is by far the best and most healthy option. It is by far the one that has the least side effects for you. So it's really easy to place all the blames on the doctors. And 100%, I'm going to agree with her that there is some amount of blame that should be placed on the doctors, because they do perceive their obese patients in a negative light. And that is extremely rude. It's idiotic. That being said, not all of it is on them. According to Virgie Tovar and Sonali Rashatoir and a few other fat activists, if you go to a doctor's office and the doctor says, I need to check your weight, and you say, nope, I'm good, you're not giving them the information that they need to make an accurate diagnosis. So now you're actively fighting the medical system. You're saying that the BMI scale is not accurate, but also you can't weigh me, and you're only going to have incomplete information. You have to make a diagnosis based on that, and if you can't, or you won't, or you misdiagnose me, it's because of fat phobia. It's like you're setting the doctors up for failure, and then you're surprised by the results.
And people's failure to lose weight is also not just because we as clinicians are not doing a good enough job as motivators either. That still suggests that weight is 100% within an individual's control. When we look at the research on why diets fail, nowhere in there does it say that it's due to low adherence. In fact, the most common reason why diets fail and most people gain the weight back is not because people are not motivated, but because there are a number of metabolic adaptations and compensatory mechanisms that occur in the body to force us back to our comfortable weight.
So Abby's talked a lot about these compensatory mechanisms when it comes to weight loss, and how your body will try its hardest to kind of come back to where it's happiest. So there's a couple things I want to address here. One of them is this, the set point theory, which is essentially that your body kind of becomes accustomed to being at a certain weight. And then once it's no longer at that weight, it will like fight tooth and nails, like give you like really strong cravings and whatnot to get you back up to that same weight. It is a thing. It's a real thing that happens. First thing is that all this bullshit that the intuitive movement shoots out about how everybody has a set point and you just have to find yours. Your set point average will rise. The more weight you gain, the happier your body will be at that new high weight, right? That's kind of how a set point average works. It actually goes up. So that's never addressed. I'm gonna cut this out. I'm actually not gonna, I'm gonna leave it for the my intuitive eating video so you guys really understand. But needless to say that this idea that compensatory mechanisms make it impossible for people to lose weight is ridiculous, because if that was true, there would never be people like Jordan Shrinks. There would never be people like Obese to Beast, right? People who have lost the weight, who have kept it off. And I'll tell you this as a fact, both my siblings have done it and they've kept it off for multiple years. So it's not an anomalous thing. And by implying that compensatory mechanisms take away, like they basically make it impossible and you can never lose weight, you're essentially taking away all agency that an individual may have when it comes to their weight loss, especially because it's not true. Compensatory mechanisms can make it more difficult, but it's another factor you have to account for. Just like there's a bajillion other factors when it comes to weight loss that you have to account for, right? By blaming compensatory mechanisms and saying, oh, well, because they're there, we can never lose weight. It's an easy out, but it also traps people in whatever state that they're in. And for some people, right, like the Virgie Tovars of the world, that just means being fat and apparently being happy. But for other people, it means immobility, houseboundness, inoperability of diseases, of masses of lymphatic tissue, of sadness, of depression, of anxiety. There's a whole host of issues, both mental and just physical, that occur with morbid obesity. So by saying that they can never lose weight, then nobody can ever lose weight, you're essentially just dooming people to live out those sad lives. And that's depressing. And it's not true. And I don't know why you want to believe that so bad.
The Biggest Loser research is a great example of this, where losers experienced drastic reductions in their metabolic rate, which resulted in them gaining the weight right back. Did these contestants adhere to their prescripted restrictive weight loss diet? Yes, they did. Were they not motivated enough? Yes, I would say that they were. This is simply how the body responds in defense to one's comfortable body weight.
All right, look, you can control weight, okay? At the end of the day, it is, for the vast majority of people, it is an element of their physique that is under their control, for the most part, right? I can understand that it might not feel that way, but it is. And calories mean something. How many calories you're eating, what type of calories you're eating, when you're eating them, all of those things matter. I don't know why she wants to pretend otherwise. Okay, that's everything that I had to say on Abbey Sharp's response to Dr. Mike. Look, Dr. Mike isn't perfect. I don't agree with a lot of his opinions as well. I have some other thoughts on some of the videos that he's done. If you guys want me to talk about it, let me know down below, you know. But Abbey Sharp is a special type of irritating to me. She's so well-intentioned, and in any other circumstance, I would have liked her so much, but she's spreading such dangerous misinformation, and she's doing it at the behest of a problematic movement. She has this weird mindset where it's like a have your cake and eat it too kind of mindset, right? Where she wants to be like this strong adherent supporter of intuitive movement and be health at every size, while still saying that, hey, I have a fact-based, factual, scientific approach to things, and not understanding that there's actually a chasm between the two, because the science doesn't support all the things you're saying. So, and she like has this funny way of like trying to tiptoe around the actual issues. Admit that this is what you personally believe and that there are issues with it. But without acknowledging it, everything she says comes across as slightly disingenuous and honestly makes me doubt her integrity. Well, that will be it from me. If you like this video, give me a thumbs up. If you hated this video, give me a thumbs down, and please leave me your comments down below. I don't generally ask for comments, but this is one of those videos that I actually want to hear other people's opinions on, right? Do you think I'm in the wrong? Do you think she's in the wrong? Do you think Dr. Mike is in the wrong? If so, how? I have a pretty strong opinion on this, but I'm also not the kind of person who tends to fixate on their opinion and say, well, if I have this opinion, then I'm right and everybody else is wrong and I'm never going to change my mind. So if there's some information that you think that I lacked or that I got wrong, which 100% I've done before and I'll do it again, right? Please do let me know down below. I learned from reading your comments so many different things, and it's genuinely a pleasure. I genuinely love reading all the comments, even if I can't respond to everything. So leave me a comment down below. It also, by the way, saves me from the horrors of the YouTube algorithm, so that's something. Also, if you want to share with your friends and family, you know, this video, let them know, hey, there's this girl on the internet, she sometimes says stuff and I like it. That would also really help me out. And, you know, the algorithm sucks. Please help me. Please. Please. I've got all my social medias linked down below. I've got Twitter, where I am a little bit toxic and a little bit petty. And also, it's where all my opinions and stuff are. If you guys also want to reach me, like talk to me, that's where you can do it. It's generally the easiest way to do so. I've got Instagram, where I've got my foodstuffs and I've got what I'm doing on a day-to-day basis. Right now, I don't really have a life, so it's just my foodstuffs. But, you know, I'm a pretty good cook, so I've got all my recipes and stuff there. So if you're interested in that kind of content, that's where you can find it. And last but not least, I've got Patreon. Think of Patreon as the tip jar for the internet. So if you like the job that I'm doing and you'd like me to continue, consider tossing a few coins in my direction. You don't have to. You're not obligated, but I would really, really appreciate it. And all the money that you give me will go directly towards buying me more eyeliner. You guys have probably seen, I don't wear eyeliner. It's because I don't have any, because it's all gone. And if you give me $1, I can buy more eyeliner. Think about it. It's an important fund, okay? I also want to give a thank you to my sponsors, to my patrons. I've got 2, you guys. That's insane to me. So I want to say a special thank you to That British Unicorn and to Wild Rose. Thank you guys so much. I super appreciate you guys. And that will be it from me. As always, I'm Jasmine, the sequel, and I am not relatable. Peace. I find this infographic that she puts up that she's like, he has a lot of these, you know, words that he uses like cheat meal and then, you know, low calorie. The other 3 I can understand, right? I can understand where she is coming from, but low calorie is just a descriptive word. That's how you would describe something that doesn't give you a lot of energy. So like a salad would be a low calorie meal for the most part, right? I don't understand why that is such a negative thing. That's just, it's a statement of fact. When did facts become offensive?